Hey guys, how you doing? How's everybody tonight? Happy Tuesday. Thank you, Ryan. Great to be back. Get my sea legs back. Ride on the cruise ship for a couple days. Let me straighten the camera out. Uh, yeah, I hope. I saw you left a message on the comments about last week. Thank you for that, and hope you guys enjoyed it. See, make sure my sound is on. Yep, should be good. So, so we were gone last week on a cruise, family cruise. My mother-in-law flew down from Ohio, her two sisters, and my two brother-in-laws and their wives, and we had a fantastic time cruising the Western Caribbean, and it was a great time. Mike says, "Welcome back. Hope you had a great vacation." Yes, it was great. Went to Rotan, Honduras, and Costa Maya, Mexico. Two places we haven't ever been before. Were pretty cool. We didn't do a whole lot on land. Not sure about how Mexican climate is. With all the stuff going on over there. But went into the ship places at the ports. That was good. Got to drink a bunch of tequila. That was always good. And had a great time. Great time being with the family and stuff. But we're back at it in the shop and on our Tuesday Night Lives, and getting back into the swing of things here. So I made that little video. If you guys, I know Ryan watched it. I'm not sure Mike got it or anybody else that's on right now saw the little recorded live show I made. It's just that it wouldn't be a gap. But I do have a Regal radial grudge car in the shop. Getting ready to do some stuff on that. I will try to put a little video together. Of course, grudge car, so we can't show too much. But guys, I'll give you the gist of everything. We're going to do wiring, plumbing, mount the scoop, cut the opening in the hood, just get it all race prepped. I think I do brake lines and some other small stuff, but we'll get that thing going here shortly. And I've been working on the Trans Am, getting the brake kit on that, and rebuilt the rear end. Although I'm waiting for one carrier bearing. Get that thing done, and we put new Moser axles and stuff in it, and been gathering some pieces and parts for Joe's car. Joe picked it up week before last, and I kind of knew better, but I went ahead and put the Holley polyurethane motor mounts in it. They come in their engine swap kits, and I really should have known better. The polyurethane mounts really transmit a lot of vibration through the chassis. And that engine, being a 535 horse LS3, has a pretty healthy camshaft in it. So we're going to try to switch that out to rubber mounts. And it was a little miscommunication. I didn't finish the e-brakes on the car. I thought we had talked and said automatic didn't need it, but Joe said he would prefer to have that hooked up. So we're going to go and I got Willwood cables coming for that, and we'll get him in probably in 2 weeks and just a day knockout and whatever, if he makes a little punch out list of what's on that. So that'll be something coming down the pike here shortly. And while I was out of town, I got all the new Lexan for the NASCAR. So that'll be something in the future that we'll have to get on. And I did send out the rotating assembly to get the crank rods and pistons all balanced and matched and everything. So that should be finishing up in the machine shop this week. So that way I can be ready to pop that together as soon as we get get a break here. But we'll just keep cranking on everything else in the meantime. So that's pretty much the new stuff that's going on here. working on the. I got half the templates made for the Ford to LS valve cover conversion. Done making templates so that I can have a chassis engineering laser cut them out of aluminum. So that's something else I've been kind of working on in between other stuff. If I get hung up on parts or whatever, I get a second to stop, I go ahead and jump on that for a little bit. But I just trying to touch everything that's in the shop so that everything keeps moving in a forward progress. So we get this all done. I did make a little. I was thinking about this on the cruise. I wanted to really get back on the tech stuff, so I made a little. It's not necessarily a tech segment. It's more of my personal beliefs segment. Hope you guys don't mind that. But yeah, one of the things my customers, which really all my customers are friends, one of the things that they always comment is that when I'm building the cars, I do it as if it was my car, and it comes through to my friends that own the cars that I really put in the extra little bit, because if I treat it as if it was mine. Same with components, selections, and stuff like that. I try to put them in a direction of where not put whatever you want to try. Every now and then we will try a new trick of the week, but most of the time we try to go back to the tried and true stuff so that we have issue-free hot rod that can be driven all over the place. And like I said, everybody conveys that they can feel that or sense that in the way that the builds go. So that's what this little segment I'm going to do here in a minute is about. Trying to put the effort in to make the job as best as it can be done. Ryan's a good candidate. He has that work ethic. I've seen it in his body shop builds, that like the Vega he's building and the square body that he's doing the body work on. I mean, the gaps and all that stuff are so perfect on that car. All the edges, the body lines and everything. He's gone above and beyond what an average or even above average shop or person would do. He's going to the perfection point. That's what I try to do with everything I do. Also, I do it as best as my abilities allow, and so that when I'm done, I can be proud of that piece. I can all the way down to every little weld in the car and stuff. May not always be perfect, but as good as as perfect as I can make them, and that's just the way I like to do it. So that's kind of the thing, when we assemble engines, or when I assemble engines, goofy little things like all the push rods. If they have writing on the push rods, I put all the push rods in with the writing going the same direction. Obviously hardware installed correctly and stuff like that. Freeze plugs all turned so that the names or numbers or whatever are stamped in the freeze plugs are all pointing in the same direction. Does it mean anything? No. But the next person that looks at it or works on it, they can say, wow, that, I can't, check that out. They put all the names in the same position. Little things like that. It just shows that you really care what you're doing. No need to thank me, Ryan. You do some awesome work. But those are the kind of things what I like to do. I'm not, I'm human. I'm not perfect. I don't always get it spot on, but that's what we try. That's what I strive for, and that's what Joe's car, obviously. I had it for a lot longer than I had originally planned, but it's because I kept going back over things I didn't like the way they were. Prime example, shifter cables. I put 3 shifter cables in that car till I found one that actually shifted properly, and all the detents and the shifter match the detents in the transmission. It just one of the other cables would have worked, sure, but it wouldn't be right. And when if it was my car and I'm hodgepodging it together, yeah, I can make it work, and it would be no issues. But to build a car for somebody and then have them not know all the idiosyncrasies of the car, you want it to be smooth and everything work the way it's supposed to work. So that's just it's what we strive for. So and a lot of people do that. I'm not the only person out there that does it. Just you guys are listening to me, so I'm going to ramble about it. But let me go ahead and we'll pop this little video on here. And so what I wanted to talk about tonight for tech tip was fastener hardware. One of the things I personally do in the shop is I put grade 8 bolts in everything, except for like body mounting and trim and stuff like that. I'll use stainless for that. The stainless obviously doesn't have a very strong, the best stainless is like a grade 5 bolt. So, you got to be careful where you put the stuff, but using it for fender mounting and body mounting and stuff like that, trim, anywhere where there's really not any load on the bolts, the stainless is good. It stays clean. On the race cars with the Lexan windows, I like to use aluminum bolts. I get them black anodized. That way they hide in the black surround on the windshield and the side windows and stuff. And being aluminum, they won't rust. If you use a black oxide screw, as soon as water gets on it, you wash the car or get some dew on it or whatever, they start turning to rust, and then they look like crap. So wherever something's visual, I try to use a stainless or aluminum anodized bolt. And then on everything that's actually a fastener in the car, I try to use grade 8 or case hardened or ARP or some type of aftermarket a bolt and nut assembly. But so let me go ahead and start this. So here's a bolts a bolt guide. So you see the top row is bolts, the second row is nuts. Now I was going to try to see if I could stop this, but I don't know if I can. So that's a grade 5 bolt. You got 3 hash marks, and there's a grade 8. It's got 6. And there's usually some letters on there. That's usually the manufacturer of the bolt. The stuff is grade 8. Is gold anodized. Now that's an aircraft bolt, NAS bolt. Those are really good for suspension points and stuff. They are actually the shank length is actually in different dimensions, so you can get the shank to go all the way through your component. ARP obviously they put their own names on the bolts, and if that's a 170,000 pound psi, if it's a stronger bolt, they'll actually put the identification. And you've got metric bolts. I don't like using metric, but we have to sometimes. And the numbers on the bolt give you the identification. Now, these two are 8.8. The first one was a flanged bolt. This one's a regular hex bolt. And it's got letters on there. That's the manufacturer of the bolt. And then this is a 10.9, and it's a black oxide bolt. Maybe case hardened. So 8.8s are like a grade 5, and the higher the number, the higher the grade. Now on a nut, they're always smooth, but if you look on the other side of them, if it's a good quality nut, there'll be markings on there. So 2 hash marks close together is a grade 8 nut. So that's, going back to this chart, you've got, it's identifying that. And we go into washers. That's an AN washer. I like using those against any hard product like engine block or suspension joint. It's about the same size as the head, gives the bolt something to rest on. Then there's a SAE washer. I don't usually use USS washers because they're larger and kind of uglier, but that's a standard SAE. Can use that where there may be a little bit of slop and you want to hide the hole. And then this is a thick washer. Now, anytime I want to bolt something solid to a softer material, sheet metal or plastic or anything else, or I want it to get a good hard pinch, I'll use the thick washer because that puts a lot more load on the components you're tightening together. And then, of course, there's a fender washer. I try not to ever use those, but if you've got to cover up a large hole in a sheet metal panel, that's what you use. You can't crank these down tight because it will warp the washer and looks like crap, and I just don't like doing it. So what I'm showing here is there's a top and a bottom on a washer. I don't know if everybody understands that, but the washers are cut in a press. So they round one side and the other side leaves a sharp edge. So the round side, in my interpretation, should be left to the hex side, and the machine flats part, or the sharp edge part, which the next picture will show, that goes against the component you're tightening. It just looks better. It has a better appearance, and I believe it clamps better that way. ARP, you can see it's got a countersink in the center of the washer, and that is for the extra strength because they're bolts. There's a sharp side, but on their bolts, I think it's the next slide, you'll see there's a large shoulder. There's the bolt. The bolt gets larger after the threads, and there's actually a radius at the base of the head of the bolt. So that's what that concave is for, so it can allow it to tighten all the way down. So, and then on the nuts, obviously, if it has markings on it because it's a quality nut, you want to leave the markings up. You don't want to put them on the you don't want to put the markings down, because then they're going to dig into the washer. They're going to dig into what component you're tightening against, and it just looks like crap. And when somebody takes it apart, the bolts is all marred up, and it just, it in my eyes, it looks like somebody put it together and didn't care what they were doing. So that's why I have this belief about the nuts and the washers and stuff. I thought I could stop that video as it was going so we could talk about it some more, but that didn't work. Maybe let me see if I can try this again. Well, what I'll do is I'll just we'll just so that's the whole thing. Maybe we'll go through that again in a minute. If you guys didn't catch that, let me know in the chat. But so basically, you should look at a hardware chart. They're all over the internet. And they give you all kinds of explanations about tightening, tensile strength, and shear strength. So you can see what the hardware is. I don't like using the grade 5 hardware because it's a softer material. It's not case hardened, or it's not tempered as much as the grade 8. So you can obviously break them at a lower torque setting. So I like the grade 8 because it's a stronger bolt, first of all, and it works better in a high stress area. And with the gold cadmium plating on them, if the vehicle is kept somewhat out of humidity, especially storage, they'll last a long time and stay nice and clean. And it just looks great, on whatever you're bolting together, to have nice shiny gold bolts in there. It just shows, that you care what you're doing and that you have the foresight to put quality fasteners in the car. All the kits that we get from the manufacturers, especially these engine swap kits and stuff, they all come with bolts and stuff. 99% of the bolts I throw away because I don't want to use them in my build. I at one time kept them, but I just don't see any reason to keep them because they're subpar in strength. I'm not going to use them in my car. Why would I want to use them in somebody else's car? I guess I could hold on to them, and then if somebody comes by looking to bum some bolt hardware and stuff at the racetrack or something, hey, here's a bucket. Go through this, see what you like. But I usually have a ton of takeout grade 8 stuff that I do that with anyway. So, but again, like I said with the washers, this is something a lot of people never realized, or maybe never even looked at the washers to see it. But next time you grab a washer, take a peek at it. So they're made in a punch press. So a punching die comes out and punches on a piece of flat steel, and that makes the washer. A center punch cuts the center out, and the outer punch cuts the outer ring out. So when it does that, it forms the washer. The metal forms because the punch is coming down on it. So that's the rounded side. So I like using that on the top. One, because now you don't have a sharp edge next to the head of the bolt or anything. And if you put the rounded edge against the sheet metal or engine block or frame or wherever, you'll see that the washer is not completely contacting the material, because it's in the center of the washer, halfway between the center opening and the outside ring opening. That's the thickest part of the washer. It's not flat because of the way it was stamped in the die. So I don't want that against the frame, because it's not flat surface now. So you're trying to tighten down against a flat surface, but the washer is not flat. But the other side that is on that from the punching, the other side is perfectly flat. So when you put that side of the washer on, it makes 100% contact. So it's going to clamp way better, and it's going to keep the metal that you're tightening down from deforming because it's flat. It may deform after the washer, but the surface area of the washer will be flat and good. So when you take stuff back apart, the metal isn't deformed, and like I said, it just looks better. Once you start looking at the washers, you can really see the difference. Many years I didn't know that. I didn't even pay attention. Just, he grab a washer out of the bin, throw it in the car, throw it on a bolt and stick it in the car. And then, but as time went on and experience and professionalism, you gain over the years, I started looking at it as, look at this. And then, especially when I started using a lot of ARP stuff, I started realizing, there's a top and a bottom and this and that, and then, kind of figured it out on my own. I'm not saying that that's 100% the way the manufacturers use them, but it's the way I do them, and it makes sense to me, and it's always worked well. So I've taken suspension parts apart, especially like lower control arms, and somebody's had the rounded side of the washer against the frame, and the hole is deformed. And when you get the control arm out, you can see that it's bent to where now the control arm doesn't want to go in and out because of the way that the loading of the washer made the frame metal deform. So then, in that little slideshow, I went into washers and the sizes of washers. And that's something I've always kind of had a pet peeve about. So if I'm going against something solid, engine block, transmission case, a billet component, or maybe not even a billet, a casting component, something that's has a very solid rigidity to it, I'll use an AN washer. And the nice thing about the AN washer is just bigger than the head of the bolt. So you're getting a good flat surface. And of course, all bolts have a slight radius under the head of the bolt. So you always want to put a washer, because that radius, you don't want that radius to load on the component you're tightening down. The head's not going to be tightened real good unless the hole is significantly larger. And then again, now you've got less bite on the head of the bolt to pull the component down. So AN washers on something like that, it's nice, clean. You can get them in stainless or in in the grade 8 gold cadmium coating. So that's what I use on all that stuff, intake bolts, all that kind of stuff. I use AN washers and all that stuff. And I typically will use the stainless. In that picture I did show the gold cadmium. So then the next washer, when you're buying grade 8, SAE is fine thread and USS is coarse thread. So the washers are different also. The SAE washer is a little smaller outer diameter, and it's definitely a smaller ID on the bolt, so it fits to the shank of the bolt a lot tighter. And then the USS washer, which is typically made for a coarse bolt, the head of the washer is much larger, and the center hole is much larger, and it's actually sloppy on the bolt. So for years I've been using the SAE washer on all fasteners because I want the washer to be, in alignment with the bolt head a lot better. I don't want the washer all offset and weird looking and stuff. So that's what I've always used on those. But now there's also, I keep in stock the thin and the thick SAE washer. So I use the thin washer if I need a larger washer head than the AN, but again, it's on something solid, and it's going to get a good bite. So you got let's just say a 3/8 intake bolt hole, but the intake has been drilled out. Some machine shops will do that. They'll open them up to maybe 7/16 so that you can shift the intake to get the ports in alignment. Well, if you used an AN washer, a good portion of the AN washer won't be touching anything. So now you're not getting a good solid clamp. So that's when I will go to the SAE washer, and being it's a casting, I can go ahead and use that thin washer. Now, if I'm bolting something together that needs clamping pressure, sway bar mounts, I don't know, a lot of things. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. Maybe like a door hinge, or anything where you want really good load transfer onto the components that you're tightening down. I'll put the thick washer, especially any kind of thin metal, because the thick washer will not deform to what you're trying to draw down. So it just makes it a more load, better bite. And then, of course, we talked about the fender washer in the video. The only time I use those is on a sheet metal piece, like an inner fender or something like that, because the way they make them. And I don't like using them because they will deform, and a deformed washer to me looks ugly. Looks like it was over tightened, which it was, and just not good. See, John's in tonight. Hey, John, how you doing? So that's kind of the deal with the washers. Round side up, sharp edge down, and then again going back to the fasteners. Your nuts, any good grade 5, almost all your grade 8s, unless it's a junky bolt or any of the NAS bolts or anything like that, ARP, they all have a marking on them identifying what the stiffness, what the material is made of, and how much strength it has and stuff like that. So again, I always try to put, I maybe once or twice I screw up and don't do it. Maybe it's in a blind hole where I can't see where I'm put it in the wall with my fingers. I can't see what I'm doing, but 99.999, I always put the identifications up so that it does not dig into the washer. To me, if you're taking something back apart, and especially if you're using like a lock washer, the lock washer, that edge will dig into the nut pretty heavily. So the last thing you want to do is dig into the identification markings of the nut to show that it's a grade 8 nut or a grade 5 or whatever you're working on. So that's just how I always do it. The markings up, that way it just makes sense. If somebody wanted to go over, especially in a racing application where you might have a tech inspector inspecting the vehicle with all the markings up, they can tell what kind of bolts they are, and whether it's the proper application and all those things. And I'll step back for a second. Lock washers, I didn't put that in the video. I just thought of that just now. Typically, I don't use lock washers. I'd rather put a nylock nut, whether a thin jam style nut or the standard thick one. if I need more uh, more torque or more anti-rattle looseness or more locking ability, then I put red Loctite under it. So that's the way that's the way I do things, and it seems to, knock on wood, it's been working good for me. Yeah, John says grade 8 minimum for you. Yep, yeah, that for sure. So also in that little video I showed NAS nut, which is aircraft, Army, Navy. They've got a bunch of different names for them. It's aircraft frame style hardware. So in a drag car, we use those in the 4-link and ladder bar setup so that the shoulder is going through all of the components, and then you put an AN style washer and then the nut, and that way you can tighten it down, but yet you have the shank of the bolt going through all the frame components, not the threads. Street car, lower control arms and stuff like that, you probably don't have to get that sophisticated. A standard grade 8 would be fine. I will sometimes take the grade 8 and get the shank to go through and then cut the excess thread off. Ever used Nord locks? No, I don't think I have. I'm not familiar with that. Stage 8s I've used, on exhaust and stuff like that. Typically, a lot of the header collectors and stuff like that, I'll use a stainless ARP, and they have the 12-point nuts on them, so the nuts are smaller. So on a 3/8, it's like a 3/8 bolt. It's like a 7/16 head, so you can get the wrenches on the collectors and stuff real good. But I'm not familiar with that. Obviously, Castle nuts, we've all used those. I have used, and maybe the Nord locks are what I would call a compression lock. I use those a lot on exhaust manifolds where the nut is actually has pressure points pushed into it, and so when you screw it on, it's actually cutting material in the nut to lock it onto the bolt. Of course, once you take it off, it's a throwaway. You got to start all over again. And typically, I would replace the stud or bolt also, because it's digging into one or the other. That's how it gets its locking. But anything high temp where you couldn't use a nylock, I'll use those. And the NAS style, they have nuts that are that way too. There's a smaller diameter. Two-piece lock washer serrated. Okay. I probably have used those and didn't even realize what the name of them was. But hey, Chris, how you doing? Yeah, so that's those are the kind of nuts that we use the AN style, crush style nut in some applications. Oil pans, stuff like that are studded. Like a lot of the racing oil pans, there's actually the pan is actually wider than the oil rail, so you have to have a stud in the block going into the rail, into the oil pan, and then there's a pipe plug in the bottom of the pan, and use a long extension, and you put a nut up inside and get the nut on the stud and then tighten it down. Those I will use a flanged serrated nut, and that works as a kind of a lock nut, so to speak. It digs, the serration digs into the aluminum, and it keeps them from falling off. So I'll use those. That's kind of, again, when we were talking about the grade 8 and all that stuff. It's finding the proper fastener for the job. You wouldn't want to pull or have somebody pull an engine apart that you just assembled, and then find on the oil pan, instead of a serrated nut, you just put a regular old nut, or I don't know how you would do it, but maybe a lock washer and then the nut. That would be totally the wrong thing. If the nut fell off, now you got a nut bouncing around in the oil pan, and a lot of these pans with the baffling and stuff in them, if the nut came loose, it could fall on the other side of the screen, windage screen, and then it could bounce around in the crankshaft and stuff. that wouldn't be good. So again, that's why I like to try to use the proper fasteners for what you're doing, because it just, one, it works better that way. That's, you use the hardware for the application that you're using for. But the other side of that too is, if somebody goes behind you, they'll say, hey, that person, was thinking when they were doing this, and they didn't just slap it together. They're actually trying to figure out the proper way of doing the components, putting them together. So that's the kind of a little bit of it's not really a tech tip. It's more how I do things and how I like to do things. Again, going back to, looking inside the engine, everything I can put together that make it look uniform. Like I said, all the push rods, all the writing goes in the same direction. It doesn't mean anything, but at least, when you take it back apart, it's not like, oh, the guy just slapped the push rods in there. No, we actually looked at them and put them in the right order. And that goes for, here's a little tech tip I can give you about fasteners and all this stuff. Taking an engine apart. I learned this a long time ago. One is I'll etch, or at least clean and magic marker, or typically I'll use Dykem and then scribe. But every rocker arm, every retainer, valve, the cylinder head location, all that stuff gets marked and all gets put back in the same exact spot that it came from. Does it have to be that way? Not at all. But what it does do is, as you're maintaining the engine, being a race engine or a high performance engine, there are, maintenance cycles you have to go through on those. And you don't want to keep moving components from one cylinder to another cylinder, and stuff like that, because what can happen is, if there's a issue with that one component on that one cylinder, if you keep moving it, next thing you know, you've got 3 or 4 components that are worn, and now you don't know why they're worn. If you keep everything in the same exact place it came from, and it starts wearing, then it's a problem on that cylinder, that intake valve, rocker arm, push rod, lifter, or exhaust, because everything went back in the same position it was before. So it just is a real good way of monitoring how things are. It kind of goes back to the I just lost it. But when you take something apart, and especially when you're younger, and or you just aren't familiar with what you're doing, you take something apart kind of in a rush, and you don't witness mark. That's what I'm trying to say. Like a wiring harness. If I'm not sure how it came apart, what I would normally do is I'd lay it back down and let the way the harness was twisted to kind of show which direction it went into. Same thing with hoses and stuff like that. But witness marks are always a good telltale of where something was and how it rode on that component, because it's actually made a wear, and you can look at that wearing of the two components, and it will show, whether it was actually coming together properly, or if there was something moving or something like that. So witness marks are always a real good telltale of how components are working together. So that being said, when you take an engine apart, and I see these TV shows doing it all the time, you should never, ever turn a motor upside down to pull the oil pan off. It's completely the wrong thing to do, and here's why. So you've got the engine sitting on your engine stand, or on a crate, or whatever you're using to tear your engine down, or even, well, it wouldn't count if it's in the car, but so you take it apart the way the engine is positioned when it's in the car. Intakes on the top, cylinder heads, oil pan on the bottom, because when it's running, things are going to fall to the bottom. If you have needle bearings coming out of a lifter, you have needle bearings coming out of a rocker arm, as Chris had. You got a lash cap on a race engine that's popped out. You got valve spring shims that are coming out. You want the engine to sit the way it is when it's in the vehicle, because that was, you're pulling it apart. You're seeing it as, if something fell through, it's going to be in the same position it was taking it apart. I was just watching Hot Rod Garage, and those guys, there's some slapstick portions of that, but they're taking apart this engine out of their '56 Chevy drag car, and they're trying to determine what happened to the motor, because it lost compression and cylinders and stuff, and they pop the heads off and immediately flip the motor upside down and pull the pan off. Well, if anything, a piece of piston, a ring land, all the other components I just said, needle bearings, valve shims, all this stuff, if any of that stuff fell into the oil pan, as soon as they turn the motor upside down, the motor would never be in that position in the car. All that stuff is going to fall back into the engine block. It could pass right through the engine and onto the floor, and you don't even know where it was or where it came from or anything. So that is a really not a good thing to do. It's really a bad thing. It's really bad habit, and just try not to ever do that. If you drop the pan, it's a pain in the butt to drop the pan with the engine sitting in the proper position. But when you drop the pan, now anything that's fell through the engine, it's going to be in its resting spot when it was in the engine. So now you can then figure out where did it come from, and it'll make sense. Very easy to turn the engine over and have a small piece that was loose in there, say a needle bearing or something like that, fall back through into the engine, and you're looking around and say, hey man, everything looks great, and put it back together, and there's a problem because you missed it. You can't always find everything just on a large scale look over where you're not really fine tuning. So that's why if you leave the motor the way it is, then you can go through and you'll find something in the pan. Then hey, now we got to go back and look in deeper into what we just took apart, because we found something now. Where'd this come from? We have to now do a better investigation of what's going on with it. So just a little tidbit I've learned over the years. It works out well. I don't think I've ever missed anything that I can think of, knock on wood, tearing a motor down using that method, because as soon as you drop the pan, there's the telltale of everything that's come loose in that motor, and you know it right away. And nothing's going to fall on the floor or anything. I guess it still could happen, but more than likely it's going to be where it came to rest, and then you'll be able to determine where it comes from. So just those are just little things, when I watch some of this stuff, you never know. Mike says most of the time I'm pulling the pan in the vehicle. Yeah, well, at least then the pan is still pretty much in the same position it would be in, so anything that fell in the pan is still going to be in there. And obviously doing it in the car makes it completely different. You don't have the you're not getting paid to pull the motor out for repair. They're doing warranty time, and you have to do it as quickly as possible, but thoroughly, so it doesn't have a yo-yo string on it when you're done. So, but I think you guys get to get what I was trying to convey with pulling the motor apart and stuff like that. Hopefully, you guys learn something with hardware, fasteners. It's something that I don't know, you just kind of don't think about after a while. But when I was on my trip this weekend, I was thinking I wanted to start putting some more tech tips in there, and it was something that I thought about right away. And then I come back yesterday and I start working on the Regal drag car, and I start seeing some of these mistakes done on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just crazy things. The the front motor plate on this car, the nut is run down almost to the shoulder of the bolt, and it has nearly an inch of thread hanging out the end of the bolt. The bolts are way too long, and they're great. They used the right hardware, but they didn't take the effort to put the right length bolt in it. It's not. It works fine the way it is. It's just when you look at it, it's like, why did the guy do that? You scratch your head, like, what were they thinking? Were they thinking? And then the other thing is, I do a lot of race car stuff, and I've said this for the last 20 years. People are always trying to get weight out of their race car, and they're like, what can I take out of the car to get my car lighter? And typically on most race car builds, there's not many components that you can take out and get 50 pounds out of the car or 100 pounds out of the car. You've already got the lightest block that you can use, or the lightest heads you can use. I mean, you can spend lottery money and do profile machining on the block and stuff like that, get away off. But what I always come back to when I'm talking to somebody about that is, you can't look for pounds when you're trying to make a car light. You got to look for ounces, and the more ounces you can find, they will eventually add up to pounds, and the pounds will actually end up in the larger quantity of pounds. So this car with four long grade 8 bolts, an inch longer than they need to be for the motor plate, it's not the end of the world, and it's not a lot of weight, but it is weight. So why not put the right bolt in? John says, worked 15 years on heavy equipment and 13 years steel mill maintenance. So hardware is huge for me. Absolutely. Yeah, heavy equipment, you can't put a cheap bolt on heavy equipment or on a milling a steel mill, on maintenance. You don't want molted metal containers, falling out because a bolt broke. It just should never happen. So you got to use the proper hardware. I did that on my 50. I thought it really looked neat, because on the old GM cars, they used to use actually a sheet metal screw, and they had a sheet metal nut welded to the inner panel. So like when the fenders and the inner fenders together and stuff. And when I did that car, I was like, I'm not putting this thing together with these bolts. So I drilled it out and put 1/4-20 button head stainless in with nylock and washers, and it looked like $1,000,000, and it was easy, cheap to do. And why put the old rusty nasty hardware on there, or spend the effort trying to clean that hardware and paint it and make it all done? Ryan says, a great topic, hardware and gaps to me how much someone cares about a build. Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel also. I want the next person. I take apart a lot of cars that were built from somebody else, and I'm just shake my head. We were just talking about the front motor plate bolts on this car. I'm like, why was that the only bolt the guy had in his shop? Did he have to go to a hardware store and buy bolts and just didn't measure? I mean, why would you even leave that bolt in the car? It's not right. It doesn't, and the end result is it works, sure, but it just looks sloppy. It looks like you didn't care, whatever. If you're at a racetrack and you're thrashing to fix something, yeah, okay, I get that. But, when you see a new car assembled, and it's assembled like that, you just got to shake your head and go, come on, what were you thinking, or were you not thinking at all? And then that's even scarier, is you're putting a race car together that somebody's going to drive and put their life in danger, and you didn't even care how you put it together. That's not a good combination by any means. So, when you're putting your hot rods together and you're doing work on them, I know hardware is not something you're going to think of all the time, but try to think about hardware. Try to put the right bolt for the job, right nut for the job, right washer for the job. Install it correctly, and you won't have any failures. And that's the beauty of it, doing that way, and it'll look great too. You go to a good guy show or something like that and see any of these big high end builds. You're not going to find a bolt that's not the right length. You go to a drag race or a NASCAR event or something like that, or a professional road racing event, you're not going to see hardware that's not correct in the correct spots and stuff like that. You're just not going to see it. That's just not how they do that stuff. And it's very easy for us as home guys or small shop guys to put out quality stuff by just thinking about the hardware as you're putting it together. Sure, sometimes it's a real pain, especially if you don't have a lot of hardware in the shop and you have to get it. That does make it a pain. But believe me, at the end, you'll either have a pretty good assortment of hardware or you'll learn quickly how to measure stuff and get the right stuff on the first try. I myself in my shop, I have a complete quarter to 3/4 grade 8 bin, all the way up bolts from in 1/4 inch gap and 1/4 inch lengths. So I go 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, all the way up to 5 inch. Some of the larger ones I may not always have all the 1/4 and a 3/4 in betweens. Just they're harder to get and you don't use them that often. But I will put what I have in there and say this is not the right size, jot it down, and then order a handful of the correct stuff to finish the job out. It's just, that's my pet peeve. I really am hard about that. Any of my friends that come in that help me work on the weekends and stuff, they all know which way a washer goes and which way the nut goes. Trust me. Chris says, went to find a black intake. And the only one I found is the black chrome. I need 10 of them, and they look great, but one cost $6.19, so I only got one that I needed. Yeah, I mean, bolts that you're using for to hold something together and decorative, it can be costly, but that's just the thing is, and you have to really look for sourcing. I have a local guy that comes and delivers bolts. He maintenances my bolt bin, and I'm slowly moving away from his hardware and going more like McMaster Car because I can get a larger quantity for the same money. I like having the guy come by and check out the stuff. Once a month he goes through all my bins because I keep door clips and Christmas tree, interior clips and light bulbs and grease fittings and cotter pins and all kinds of stuff. Pretty much, there's not a whole lot that I have to run out to the store and get. I like everything right here, so as I'm going, I can just keep going. Now that I'm been doing more and more LS, I'm slowly putting together all the proper length bolts for LS, all in like stainless button head for like the timing covers and the valley covers, rear covers, the intake manifolds. There's a bunch of different lengths, so now I've got those all in different lengths so that I can get the correct length and use a good stainless cap screw. So that way, it looks nice with the proper diameter washers and stuff. So, it's for me and anybody that's doing this for a living, it's worth it to invest the money in getting all the components because you don't want to have to be waiting. Oh, I need this, I need that. I mean, I've got bins and bins of weather pack and Delphi multi-pack fittings, and even I have a pretty good assortment of Deutsch connectors because again I don't want to have to wait to pick up a connector, and typically I'll make my own harnesses. If there's a sub harness I need for a Holley system or something like that, rather than having to figure it out and then call and order it and have to wait a week to get it, I'll just build it fresh right here in the shop, and that way I can make my leads the length I want, and I don't have to worry about having a bunch of splices. That's another pet peeve of mine. I like all the wiring, whatever wire you start with, I want it at the other end of the car. I want it to be the same color wire. And hopefully it's the same piece of wire without any splices in it. Not that there's anything wrong with splicing, but nothing drives me more crazy to pull a component out of a car and find in a 4-foot section 4 splices and 3 different color wires. It's like, wait a minute, it was started red, then there's a section of yellow, now there's a blue, wait a minute, there's a white, and it's purple on the other end. First of all, it makes it crazy to try to diagnose the problem, but it's just not right. Sure, it works. John says stainless bolts are equivalent to the grade 2 bolts. Yep, absolutely. I only use stainless for something that's not clamping anything together. Like the intake bolts and stuff like that on the LS engine. They use 10 of them. They only torque to I think it's 14 foot-pounds on a 8 mil M8. So I mean, it's way below the torque spec that it needs to be. It's about what the stainless bolt is good for. Now, something that needs to be torqued, again, M8 or a 5/16. Yeah, 5/16 M8 is the same. So on a 5/16 bolt or M8 that needs to be torqued to 25 foot-pounds, obviously you can't use a stainless bolt. It's not going to work. You may get it to torque, but it's going to fail. That's not the proper bolt for the proper thing. The stainless stuff that I mentioned is usually for trinkets and stuff like that, or show stuff. But I won't use that anything. You got to look at the torque that bolt is going to require, and whether the material of the bolt that you're using is, if it's in the range that you can use it for. So even a lot of the stainless I buy from McMaster Car, and it's I think it's 18.9. So it's like a better, higher strength grade stainless than a regular part store grade. If you go to Ace Hardware, the stainless there is not going to be the same quality as a stronger stainless bolt from a bolt company like McMaster Cars or somebody like that. You have to, again, do the research, find out what you're using it for, what kind of torque it's supposed to have, and if that bolt can handle the torque that you need to pull it to. So those are kind of just little things that we all need to go over again. Sometimes, because you get complacent and don't want to put I can just go over to Ace and buy the bolt there. Ace has got a really good assortment of hardware, but it's not. Their stainless is marine stainless. It's just made for putting boats together with. So it's not the high torque loads that we need for most of the components we're dealing with. You definitely do not want to put a stainless bolt on any suspension point or anything that, again, that's going to hold any kind of load. It's not the right application. It will fail, and hopefully if it does fail, it doesn't cause any issues where you put yourself in danger or somebody else in danger. So just got to really pay attention to hardware. If you're really not sure, even after what we were talking about tonight, because I really didn't give a lot of specs, but if you're not sure what a grade 5 is or grade 8 is, take some time, hit the Google machine, and find there's a lot of good hardware manufacturers on the internet, and they have the information there on the hardware. A lot of them will give you torque specs or tensile strength on the bolts and stuff, and have good maps and stuff to where you can figure out what bolt you need for your component. But you can never go wrong with a grade 8. That's why I use grade 8 for 99% of the stuff I build in the shop, because you can't go wrong with a grade 8. You can't overkill, at least in my in my thinking, you can't overkill the strength of a bolt. A good strong bolt will always be, uh, you know, the best thing to do. And if you need, you know, high strength like stainless, there are, you know, ARP does make some pretty good stainless. I think it's a little bit higher strength than a grade 2, more closer to a grade 5. Um, it's been a while since I looked at the specs, but they do have some stuff that you can get some pretty good torque values out of. Um, but it's not pure stainless. It's got metal in it. So it's not, you know, it's not like a true marine bolt will be non-magnetic because with the salt corrosion and stuff like that. But again, when there's no magnet, when there's no, it's not a magnet bolt, there's no strength. It's going to be a really weak bolt. So that's pretty much what's going on. It's 8 o'clock, so I guess we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'll try to get some more tech stuff out for next week, and we'll go from there. And hope everybody has a great week. I'm glad to be back home, and we will be live again next Tuesday. So with that, I will bid you guys a fair adieu, and we'll see y'all next week. Yeah, I already shut off.
Mom's waiting for it.
The microphone was still on.
Kelly's it. Shit.
I just shut it off.
So I just said fuck. Kelly just.
Okay. Well, he was picking up his a box off my truck, and then we got talking on my battery and stuff like that. So.
They're looking.
Oh. All right, I'm sorry.